Well, I didn't expect to return to the story because it's a foregone conclusion, but now the story has a hell of a footnote, so I have to. Yes, the historic confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson is effectively set, but now we're looking at a historic Supreme Court confirmation not just because of the melanin-enhanced genitals for which she was selected, but because this historic nominee, by her own description, in fact has no opinion about this country's most important piece of history. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee deadlocked 11-11 on the motion to advance Jackson's nomination to the full Senate for confirmation. That means nothing more than some additional procedural requirements to finish the deal. The full Senate voted on Monday night to advance her nomination out of committee, and her final confirmation vote is expected by the end of the week. That confirmation vote will also be drama-free now that 3 Republicans have joined all Democrats in supporting Jackson. Susan Collins last week and Lisa Murkowski and Mitt Romney this week praising meaningless things like Jackson's demeanor and temperament or her status as a person of honor as reasons to confirm her, as though the Supreme Court is just a bench of the nicest people we can find. We shouldn't care about pleasantries. We should care about legal qualifications. But on that topic, there's another common theme among these statements. Nobody questions Judge Jackson's qualifications, they frequently say. Well, number one, that's not even true. But number two, it turns out that we should, not just because of the questions already asked, but because of yet another fundamental one that Jackson either can't or refuses to answer. Because for all the talk of qualifications, strictly speaking, there is only one qualification to hold a seat on the Supreme Court, and that is the oath to uphold the Constitution. That is the only qualification for the office that the Constitution itself requires. And yes, a law degree certainly helps build expertise in the law, and so does a lengthy legal career, but ultimately, loyalty to the Constitution is the only absolute necessity. You can be the smartest Ivy League alum of all time, with the longest, greatest, most accomplished legal career of all time, but if you don't mean it when you say you will uphold the Constitution of the United States, none of the rest means a damn thing. And of course, I'm not saying that Jackson will fail to raise her right hand and say the oath upon her now inevitable entry onto the bench. I am saying that she probably won't mean it, though, and that's not just my own cynical speculation. That's according to her own words that she provided in writing when asked about it. To much less coverage and discussion than the hearing, there is also a written questionnaire that goes to the Supreme Court nominee. This one is 330 pages of questions from members of the Senate Judiciary Committee and responses from Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yes, it's a gigantic wall of text that almost nobody reads, but in ways, it's more valuable than the in-person testimony because it offers the nominee a chance to have time and to be thoughtful and specific and researched in her answers in a way that's not always possible in the hot seat. But while this format offers opportunity for specific and technical answers to complex questions, we know it's often the simple ones that are the most revealing, not just in general, but specifically with this nominee. If what is a woman stumps you, that's a good indicator there's other entry-level stumpery to be found. Like, for example, hey, the philosophical foundation for this country. Would you say that you agree or disagree? To the original point, you can't really swear an oath to the Constitution if you don't understand and affirm the thinking behind it. That sounds like a given for any Supreme Court nominee, but since absolutely nothing is a given anymore, it's probably best to ask. And so Ted Cruz did. Buried deep on page 79 of the questionnaire, Ted Cruz asks about the concept of natural or inalienable rights that are the basis and the justification for our split from Britain and the formation of our government. Quote, please explain in your own words the theory prevalent among the members of the Founding Fathers generation that humans possess natural rights that are inherent or inalienable. Jackson responds, quote, the theory that humans possess inherent or inalienable rights is reflected in the Declaration of Independence, which states, quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, first of all, that response was a failure on a high school short answer prompt. Explain in your own words was the ask, not copy and paste the text from the Declaration. But the follow-up clarifies. She doesn't explain in her own words because she doesn't believe in this concept, in her own words, or at least she refuses to say if she does. Cruz then asks, do you hold a position on whether individuals possess natural rights, yes or no? Jackson responds, I do not hold a position on whether individuals possess natural rights. In other words, I do not hold a position on whether Thomas Jefferson was right. I do not hold a position on the entire moral and philosophical basis for our government. I do not hold a position on the justification for our Constitution itself. And that is a very big problem, not just in this specific professional context, but culturally in our country overall, professionally, as a judge. If she holds no position about the reason why the Constitution is structured the way that it is for the purpose of securing and defending those inalienable rights, she holds no position about whether the Constitution itself has any legitimacy at all. Per her prior explanation of the child porn sentences, she has already said that where she personally finds the law to be inadequate, she has no trouble inserting her own personal preferences in its place. So if the philosophical basis for the Constitution is similarly lacking in her judgment, well, you can expect the same treatment for the Constitution as well. But even beyond that, just culturally, if we as a society take no position on whether individuals have natural rights, they don't. Or, more accurately, those rights will be disregarded and abused. If your rights don't come from nature, or from God, or from the pre-existing order of the world, however you'd like to conceptualize it, then they're simply the creations of man. If your rights are simply the creations of man, then they are not, in fact, inalienable. They're very alienable. That is to say, if the government decides tomorrow that you don't have any rights and they lock you in a cell, well, there wouldn't be a problem with that because your rights are merely what the government says they are. And the government has said you have none. And if you hear that hypothetical and you respond with, yeah, well, the government would be wrong if they did that. Yes, they would be wrong. Why is that? It's because there's a pre-existing moral structure that makes that wrong, as in your natural, inalienable rights. And anybody who rejects that concept is granting the premise that government can abuse you anytime they want to because only government decides what's okay and what isn't. And I've seen plenty of Jackson's defenders saying, you idiot, the Declaration of Independence isn't binding law. Why would you even ask about that? It's legally irrelevant. You're right. The Declaration is not binding law. The Constitution is, but we can't ignore the question, why is the Constitution binding? What gives the Constitution binding legitimacy? Is it just that we all agree that it's binding? And if so, why do we all agree? On what do we agree? And the correct answer is because it enshrines fundamental moral truths that pre-exist government. Neither government nor our consensus gave these truths legitimacy. They were self-evident in their existence before we ever even gathered to recognize and codify them. And if you accept that premise, well, that's exactly what Ted Cruz was asking about, because if you reject that premise, the legitimacy of our entire legal structure falls. And if you think that's alarmist or hyperbolic, well, it isn't. If we view this country's foundation with apathy or hostility, there's nothing that can be built upon it, and it will crumble. And those are the only two explanations for Jackson's response, either apathy or hostility to this country's foundation. It's either that she doesn't understand or doesn't care, which I find hard to believe for a Harvard law grad with a lengthy legal career. This is high school level philosophy of the law, not some obscure technical legal theory. Or it's that she knows that answering this question honestly is even more disqualifying than dodging it. It's that she doesn't believe in or rejects the idea that people have natural inalienable rights that pre-exist government, but that saying so, even on page 79 of a text wall that nobody will read, is still too blatant and risky of a statement to make. But either way, ignorance or malice, it should be an automatic disqualifier for any senator with even an ounce of understanding and loyalty to this country's legal structure that a Supreme Court justice is entrusted to protect. Because it does not matter how nice you are. It does not matter how honorable you are. It does not matter how delightfully dark your skin is or how undefinably female your crotch is. If you don't affirm the premise of American government, you have no business in American government. That's why the oath is administered. If you don't mean the oath when you say it, you don't get the office for good reason. But unfortunately, That's another good reason we're intent to learn the hard way. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Gab. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.